What's up, everybody? Welcome to another primary source walkthrough. This time we have Judith Sargent Murray's On the Equality of the Sexes from 1790. Now, this primary source is kind of separate from the others that we've been talking about this week. Um, I think that Adams and Washington, the Alien and Sedition Acts and Washington's farewell speech go well together. Banneker's letter to Jefferson addresses a clear issue, um, but Judith Sargent Murray is a bit um, separate here, and she shouldn't be. This should be another reason for us to take a moment and wonder about the revolutionary nature of the American Revolution. And what Murray is going to write about here is she is going to advocate that women get equal access to the society that men do. And she's going to point out a number of ways which that isn't happening, and it's a I think this is dripping with wonderful sarcastic wit and just some really kind of profound observations. I think it goes well with Abigail Adams and the letter to John that she wrote during the Revolutionary War, and it should be considered in this long story of women having to kind of force their way in and get men to realize that they too deserve the rights and protections and opportunities that men have. And consider at the time under English law, prior to the Revolution and continuing after, the principle of coverture that basically says that women surrender their identities to their husbands at marriage. Women were left out of the Revolution. I mean, think about Adam's response to Abigail, where he just says, "I can't help but laugh at you." So, let's jump into Murray here and see what she has to say. And she's going to comment on a couple things. Number one, she's going to comment on the ability of women, and number two, the opportunities of women. So the first bit, she's going to jump in and she's going to say, okay, we have to ask right at the start, why are women considered deficient? Okay. But suffer me to ask, in what the minds of females are so notoriously deficient or unequal? And she says, look, my my thinking, and I think you'll all agree, she says, is that the intellect is divided into four different parts: the imagination, reason, memory, and judgment. So, how creative are you? How well can you logically reason? How much do you remember? And are you capable of assessing things? She goes on a little bit to talk about this, and she's going to start with imagination. She says, well, what about women and our imaginative minds? She says again, it has been observed. Oops. Sorry if that got a little blurry. That if the turpitude of the conduct of our sex has ever been so enormous, so extremely ready are we that the very first thought presents us with an apology so plausible as to produce our actions even in an amiable light. What she means here is it doesn't take much thinking at all to give us a defense. Another instance of our creative powers is our talent for slander. How ingenious are we at inventive scandal? What a formidable story can we in a moment fabricate merely from the force of a prolific imagination. She's talking about Chisme here, right? She's like, look at all the gossip we can come up with. Like, we're bored, so we come up with this stuff, and my goodness, look at all the stories that we can weave. Isn't that a sign of our creativity? She goes on and she says, well, are we deficient in reason? She says, well, we can only reason from what we know. Okay, so reason comes from knowledge. So we can't apply knowledge if we don't have knowledge in the first place. So she says, we can only reason from what we know, and if an opportunity of acquiring knowledge has been denied to us, the inferiority of our sex cannot be fairly deducted from thence. She's saying, how can you say we can't reason? Because we know that reason depends on knowledge, but we're being denied the knowledge. So how can we be determined to be deficiently unreasonable if we aren't allowed to have the knowledge in the first place? And she goes on with a bit more proof for this, and she's like, look, think about reason and judgment, and think about a 2-year-old. Is a 2-year-old boy more capable of reason and judgment than a 2-year-old girl? And she says no. The difference is in how they're raised. As the underlying part here suggests, as their years increase, the sister must be wholly domesticated, while the brother is led by the hand through all the flowery paths of science. She's saying that nurture has a lot to do here. So they both have the same potential. It's just one is taught to not be of knowledge and of reason and of judgment, and instead to be made domestic, to do the work of the kitchen and the house, while the other is actually taught those things. I mean, she has a fair point. And now Murray points out, like, look, because of this, we're miserable. We're unhappy. She says, women feel the want of a cultivated mind. Is she single? She, in vain, seeks to fill up time from sexual employments or amusements. She doesn't know what else to do. So she's being denied these things, number one, and number two, it's causing her to feel inferior, which prevents her happiness. Now, she says, was she permitted the same instructors as her brother, with an eye, however, to their particular departments, for the employment of a rational mind, an ample field would be opened. And she's saying women are being held back by this lack of education. If you give her the education, then everything opens up. Now, she continues, and she says, will it be urged that those acquirements would supersede our domestic duties? And she's saying, I know that you motherfucker... Oh, sorry, excuse me. I shouldn't swear on these videos. She says, look, I know that you jerky men are going to say, well, if you're too busy being educated, who's going to take care of the house? Well, she says, look, once things are taken care of, they don't require any further mental attention. If your dinner gets made, if the kids are taken care of and in bed, what does it matter? Like, I'm not doing anything else. I can take care of my education, and then I could be a fully rational being. And then, and she kind of hits, forgive the phrasing, hits the dudes right in the junk. And she says, look, if that doesn't work for you, let me appeal to your religion. And she says, I would calmly ask, is it reasonable that a candidate for immortality, for the joys of heaven, an intelligent being, whose eternity is supposed to be the enjoyment of contemplating the works of God, should be so degraded as to be allowed no other ideas than pudding or sewing? Like, are you kidding me? Like, if I am promised the eternal benefits of my Creator and contemplating Him in heaven, why are you? Am I only going to be able to contemplate pudding and sewing shirts? Like, are you kidding me? I mean, she's got a real good point there. So, all she's saying in the end is that we want equality. That's all we want. And this is in 17. She publishes it in the 1790s, but she writes it during the Revolution. She writes it in 1779. Women were supposed to. Women kind of felt like they had to have the same rights as men, like the same things that the men were fighting for in the Revolution, the women were fighting for also, and now at the end of the Revolution, they don't have it, and they're not going to. Except in New Jersey, women can't vote for anything, and there isn't a universal right for women to vote in any election that they want to until the 19th Amendment in 1920. There are still barriers to equality that women are fighting for. And that's why I think reading Judith Sargent Murray is important. Number one, it kind of gets us to question the American Revolution and how revolutionary it actually was. And number two, it reminds us that the struggles of today aren't new. Kind of like with the Banneker source, it's like this observation about the way in which American society works and how it privileges some over others. It is not a new question. It's a matter of how much voice are we giving that question, and I think this source is important for addressing that. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up there, but if you have any questions about Judith Sargent Murray or her primary source or the context of the source, feel free to reach out to me. Happy to answer your questions. You can get me via email or at an office hour. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you on the next one.